Ankara, formerly known as Ancyra and Angora, is the capital of the Republic of Turkey, with a population of 4,587,558 in the urban center and 5,150,072 in its province. It is Turkey's second largest city after Istanbul. Ankara was Ataturk's headquarters from 1920 and has been the capital of the Republic since its founding in 1923, replacing Istanbul following the fall of the Ottoman Empire. The government is a prominent employer, but Ankara is also an important commercial and industrial city. Located at the center of Turkey's road and railway networks, the city gave its name to the Angora wool shorn from Angora rabbits, the long-haired Angora goat, and the Angora cat. The area is also known for its pears, honey, and muscat grapes. Although situated in one of the driest places of Turkey and surrounded mostly by steppe vegetation except for the forested areas on the southern periphery, Ankara can be considered a green city in terms of green areas per inhabitant, at 72 square meters per head. Ankara is a very old city with various Hittite, Phrygian, Hellenistic, Roman, Byzantine, and Ottoman archaeological sites. The historical center of town is a rocky hill rising 150 meters over the left bank of the Ankara Ke, a tributary of the Sakarya River. The classical Sangarias. The hill remains crowned by the ruins of the old citadel. Although few of its outworks have survived, there are well-preserved examples of Roman and Ottoman architecture throughout the city, the most remarkable being the 20 BC Temple of Augustus and Rome that boasts the Monumentum Anciranum, the inscription recording the Res Gestae Divi Augusti name. As with many ancient cities, Ankara has gone by several names over the ages. It has been identified with the Hittite cult center Inkowus, although this remains a matter of debate. In classical antiquity and during the medieval period, the city was known as Ankara in Greek and Ancyra in Latin. The Galatian Celtic name was probably a similar variant. Following its annexation by the Seljuk Turks in 1073, the city became known in many European languages as Angora. It was also known in Ottoman Turkish as Anguru. The form Angora is preserved in the names of breeds of many different kinds of animals, and in the names of several locations in the U.S. history. A region's history can be traced back to the Bronze Age Hattic civilization, which was succeeded in the 2nd millennium BC by the Hittites, in the 10th century BC by the Phrygians, and later by the Lydians, Persians, Greeks, Galatians, Romans, Byzantines, and Turks. Ancient history. The oldest settlements in and around the city center of Ankara belonged to the Hattic civilization, which existed during the Bronze Age and was gradually absorbed c. 2000 to 1700 BC by the Indo-European Hittites. The city grew significantly in size and importance under the Phrygians starting around 1000 BC, and experienced a large expansion following the mass migration from Gordian, after an earthquake which severely damaged that city around that time. In Phrygian tradition, King Midas was venerated as the founder of Ancyra, but Pausanias mentions that the city was actually far older, which accords with present archaeological knowledge. Phrygian rule was succeeded first by Lydian and later by Persian rule, though the strongly Phrygian character of the peasantry remained, as evidenced by the gravestones of the much later Roman period. Persian sovereignty lasted until the Persians defeated the hands of Alexander the Great, who conquered the city in 333 BC. Alexander came from Gordian to Ankara and stayed in the city for a short period. After his death at Babylon in 323 BC and the subsequent division of his empire among his generals, Ankara and its environs fell into the share of Antigonus, another Another important expansion took place under the Greeks of Pontus, who came there around 300 BC and developed the city as a trading center for the commerce of goods between the Black Sea ports and Crimea to the north, Assyria, Cyprus and Lebanon to the south, and Georgia, Armenia and Persia to the east. By that time the city also took its name Gamma Kappa Upsilon Rho Alpha, which, in slightly modified form, provides the modern name of Ankara. Celtic history. In 278 BC, the city, along with the rest of central Anatolia, was occupied by a Celtic group, the Galatians, who were the first to make Ankara one of the main tribal centers, the headquarters of the Tetrarchy tribe. Other centers were Picinos, today's Balhisar, for the Trachmi tribe, and Tavium, to the east of Ankara, for the Tolstobogi tribe. The city was then known as Ancyra. The Celtic element was probably relatively small in numbers, a warrior aristocracy which ruled over Phrygian-speaking peasants. However, the Celtic language continued to be spoken in Galatia for many centuries. At the end of the 4th century, Jerome, a native of Dalmatia, observed that the language spoken around Ankara was very similar to that being spoken in the northwest of the Roman world near Trier. Roman history. The city was subsequently conquered by Augustus in 25 BC and passed under the control of the Roman Empire. Now the capital city of the Roman province of Galatia, Ancyra continued to be a center of great commercial importance. Ankara is also famous for the Monumentum Ancyranum, which contains the official record of the acts of Augustus, known as the Res Gestae Divi Augusti, an inscription cut in marble on the walls of this temple. The ruins of Ancyra still furnish today valuable bas-reliefs, inscriptions and other architectural fragments. Augustus decided to make Ancyra one of 3 main administrative centers in central Anatolia. The town was then populated by Phrygians and Celts, the Galatians, who spoke a language somewhat closely related to Welsh and Gaelic. Ancyra was the center of a tribe known as the Tetrarchy, and Augustus upgraded it into a major provincial capital for his empire. 2 other Galatian tribal centers, Tavium near Yozgat, and Persinus to the west, near Sivri-Hisar, continued to be reasonably important settlements in the Roman period, but it was Ancyra that grew into a grand metropolis. An estimated 200,000 people lived in Ancyra in good times during the Roman Empire, a far greater number than was to be the case from after the fall of the Roman Empire until the early 20th century. A small river, the Ankara, ran through the center of the Roman town. It has now been covered and diverted, but it formed the northern boundary of the old town during the Roman, Byzantine and Ottoman periods. Ankara, the rim of the majestic hill to the south of the present city center, stood well outside the Roman city, but may have been a summer resort. In the 19th century, the remains of at least one Roman villa, a large house, were still standing not far from where the Ankara presidential residence stands today. To the west, the Roman city extended until the area of the Genclik Park and railway station, while on the southern side of the hill, it may have extended downwards as far as the site presently occupied by KocatepeMosque University. It was thus a sizable city by any standards and much larger than the Roman towns of Gaul or Britannia. Ancyra's importance rested on the fact that it was the junction point where the roads in northern Anatolia running north, south and east-west intersected. The Great Imperial Road running east passed through Ankara, and a succession of emperors and their armies came this way. They were not the only ones to use the Roman highway network, which was equally convenient for invaders. In the second half of the 3rd century, Ancyra was invaded in rapid succession by the Goths coming from the west and later by the Arabs. For about a decade, the town was one of the western outposts of one of Palmyrian Empress Zenobia in the Syrian desert, who took advantage of a period of weakness and disorder in the Roman Empire to set up a short-lived state of her own. The town was reincorporated into the Roman Empire under Emperor Aurelian in 272. The Tetrarchy, a system of multiple emperors introduced by Diocletian, seems to have engaged in a substantial program of rebuilding and of road construction from Ankara westwards to German Ilium. In its heyday, Roman Ankara was a large market and trading center, but it also functioned as a major administrative capital, where a high official ruled from the city's praetorium, a large administrative palace or office. During the 3rd century, life in Ancyra, as in other Anatolian towns, seems to have become somewhat militarized in response to the invasions and instability of the town. Christianity. Early Christian martyrs of Ancyra, about whom little is known, included Proclus and Hilarios, who were natives of the otherwise unknown nearby village of Calliope, and suffered repression under the Emperor Trajan. In the 280s we hear of Philomenos, a Christian corn merchant from southern Anatolia, being captured and martyred in Ankara, and Eustathius. As in other Roman towns, the reign of Diocletian marked the culmination of the persecution of the Christians. In 303, Ancyra was one of the towns where the co-emperors Diocletian and his deputy Galerius launched their anti-Christian persecution. In Ancyra, the first target was the 38-year-old bishop of the town, whose name was Clement. Clement's life describes how he was taken to Rome, then sent back, and forced to undergo many interrogations and hardship before he, and his brother, and various companions were put to death. The remains of the Church of St. Clement can be found today in a building just off Istanbul.Ankara in the Ulus district. Quite possibly this marks the site where Clement was originally buried. 4 years later, a doctor of the town named Plato and his brother Antiochus also became celebrated martyrs under Galerius. Theodotus of Ancyra is also venerated as a saint. However, the persecution proved unsuccessful, and in 314 Ancyra was the center of an important council of the early church, which considered ecclesiastical policy for the reconstruction of the Christian church after the persecutions, and in particular the treatment of lapsi, Christians who had given in and conformed to paganism during these persecutions. 3 councils were held in the former capital of Galatia in Asia Minor during the 4th century. The first of these, the Synod of Ancyra, an Orthodox plenary synod, was held in 314, and its 25 disciplinary canons constitute one of the most important documents in the early history of the administration of the sacrament of penance. 9 of them deal with conditions for the reconciliation of the lapsi, the others, with marriage, alienations of church property, etc. Though paganism was probably tottering in Ancyra in Clement's day, it may still have been the majority religion. 20 years later, Christianity and monotheism had taken its place. Ancyra quickly turned into a Christian city, with a life dominated by monks and priests and theological disputes. The town council or senate gave way to the bishop as the main local figurehead. During the middle of the 4th century, Ancyra was involved in the complex theological disputes over the nature of Christ, and a form of Arianism seems to have originated there. In 362 to 363, the Emperor Julian the Apostate passed through Ancyra on his way to an ill-fated campaign against the Persians, and according to Christian sources, engaged in a persecution of various holy men. the stone base for a statue, with an inscription describing Julian as Lord of the whole world from the British Ocean to the barbarian nations, can still be seen, built into the eastern side of the inner circuit of the walls of Ankara Castle. The column of Julian, which was erected in honor of the emperor's visit to the city in 362, still stands today. In 375, Arian bishops met at Ancyra and deposed several bishops, among them St. Gregory of Nyssa. In the late 4th century, Ancyra became something of an imperial holiday resort. After Constantinople became the East Roman capital, emperors in the 4th and 5th centuries would retire from the humid summer weather on the Bosphorus to the drier mountain atmosphere of Ancyra. Theodosius II kept his court in Ancyra in the summers. Laws issued in Ancyra testify to the time they spent there. The city's military as well as logistical significance lasted well into the long Byzantine rule. Although Ancyra temporarily fell into the hands of several Arab Muslim armies numerous times after the 7th century, it remained an important crossroads polis within the Byzantine Empire until the late 11th century. It was also the capital of the powerful opposition theme, and after c. 750 of the Busalarian theme, Ancyra, known in the West also as Angora, continued to be a residential see of the Eastern Orthodox Church until the 20th century, with about 40,000 faithful, mostly Turkish-speaking, but that situation ended as a result of the 1923 Convention concerning the exchange of Greek and Turkish populations. The earlier Armenian genocide put an end to the residential eparchy of Ancyra of the Armenian Catholic Church, which had been established in 1850. Both the Greek Archbishopric and the Armenian Eparchy are now listed by the Catholic Church as titular sees. It is also a titular metropolis of the Ecumenical Patriarchate of Constantinople. Turkish history. In 1071, the Turkish Seljuk Sultan Alparslan conquered much of eastern and central Anatolia after his victory at the Battle of Manzikert. He then annexed Ankara, an important location for military transportation and natural resources, to his territory in 1073. After the Battle of Kozay Dag in 1243, in which the Mongols defeated the Seljuks, most of Anatolia became part of the dominion of the Mongols. Taking advantage of Seljuk decline, a semi-religious caste of craftsmen and tradespeople named the Hayla chose Ankara as their independent city-state in 1290. Orhunay, the second bey of the Ottoman Empire, captured the city in 1356. Timur defeated Bayezid at the Battle of Ankara in 1402 and took the city, but in 1403 Ankara was again under Ottoman control. The Levant Company maintained a factory in the town from 1639 to 1768. In the 19th century, its population was estimated at 20,000 to 60,000. It was sacked by Egyptians under Ibrahim Pasha in 1832. Prior to World War I, the town supported a British consulate and a population of around 28,000, roughly one-third of whom were Christian. Following the Ottoman defeat at World War I, the Ottoman capital Constantinople and much of Anatolia were occupied by the Allies, who planned to share these lands between Armenia, France, Greece, Italy and the United Kingdom, leaving for the Turks the core piece of land in central Anatolia. In response, the leader of the Turkish nationalist movement, Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, established the headquarters of his resistance movement in Ankara in 1920. After the Turkish War of Independence was won and the Treaty of Chevreuse was superseded by the Treaty of Lausanne, the Turkish nationalists replaced the Ottoman Empire with the Republic of Turkey on 29 October 1923. A few days earlier, Ankara had officially replaced Constantinople as the new Turkish capital city on the 13th of October 1923. After Ankara became the capital of the newly founded Republic of Turkey, new development divided the city into an old section, called Ulus, and a new section, called Yenisehir. Ancient buildings reflecting Roman, Byzantine, and Ottoman history and narrow winding streets mark the old section. The new section, now centered on Kizilay Square, has the trappings of a more modern city. Wide streets, hotels, theaters, shopping malls, and high-rises. Government offices and foreign embassies are also located in the new section. Ankara has experienced a phenomenal growth since it was made Turkey's capital. It was a small town of no importance when it was made the capital of Turkey. In 1924, the year after the government had moved there, Ankara had about 35,000 residents. By 1927 there were 44,553 residents, and by 1950 the population had grown to 286,781. The 2015 Ankara bombings occurred on the 10th of October 2015 at 10:04 local time in Ankara. 2 bombs were detonated outside the entrance of the Ankara Central Railway Station, killing more than 105 and injuring more than 400 people. The attack is the deadliest of its kind in Turkey's modern history. 2 bombings have occurred in the city in 2016. The February 2016 Ankara bombing occurred on the 17th of February 2016 in Ankara. At least 28 people were killed when a bomb attack targeted a convoy of shuttles carrying both civilians and military personnel during evening rush hour. The Kurdistan Freedom Hawks claimed responsibility for the attack. The March 2016 Ankara bombing occurred on the 13th of March 2016 in Kizilay, Ankara. The attack targeted Guven Park. At least 27 people were killed and 75 people injured in the bombing, according to the governorship of Ankara. Panoramic views. Climate. Ankara has a hot summer continental climate under the Köppen classification and a hot summer continental or a hot summer oceanic climate under the True Arthur classification. Due to its elevation and inland location, Ankara has cold, snowy winters and hot, dry summers. Rainfall occurs mostly during the spring and autumn. Under Köppen climate classification, Ankara borders on a dry summer continental climate with a warm summer subtype, with some regions of the province having a true warm summer subtype of continental climate, depending on elevation. Its climate is near the borderline of a cold semi-arid climate. Because of Ankara's high altitude and its dry summers, nightly temperatures in the summer months are cool. Ankara lies in USDA hardiness zone 7b. Ankara's annual average precipitation is fairly low at 400 mm. Nevertheless, precipitation can be observed throughout the year. Monthly mean temperatures range from 0.3 degrees Celsius in January to 23.5 degrees Celsius in July, with an annual mean of 12.02 degrees Celsius. Demographics. Ankara had a population of 75,000 in 1927. In 2013, Ankara province had a population of 5,045,083. When Ankara became the capital of the Republic of Turkey in 1923, it was designated as a planned city for 500,000 future inhabitants. During the 1920s, 1930s and 1940s, the city grew in a planned and orderly pace. However, from the 1950s onward, the city grew much faster than envisioned. because unemployment and poverty forced people to migrate from the countryside into the city in order to seek a better standard of living. As a result, many illegal houses called gecekondu were built around the city, causing the unplanned and uncontrolled urban landscape of Ankara, as not enough planned housing could be built fast enough. Although precariously built, the vast majority of them have electricity, running water and modern household amenities. Nevertheless, many of these gecekondus have been replaced by huge public housing projects in the form of tower blocks such as Elvankent, Yaman and Genclik, and also as mass housing compounds for military and civil service accommodation. Although many gecekondus still remain, they too are gradually being replaced by mass housing compounds, as empty land plots in the city of Ankara for new construction projects are becoming impossible to find. Economy. The city has exported mohair and Angora wool internationally for centuries. In the 19th century, the city also exported substantial amounts of goat and cat skins, gum, wax, honey, berries, and madder root. It was connected to Constantinople by railway before the First World War, continuing to export mohair, wool, berries, and grain. The central Anatolia region is one of the primary locations of grape and wine production in Turkey, and Ankara is particularly famous for its Klasik Arazi and Muscat grapes, and its Kavaklıdere wine, which is produced in the Kavaklıdere neighborhood within the Ankara district of the city. Ankara is also famous for its pears. Another renowned natural product of Ankara is its indigenous type of honey, which is known for its light color and is mostly produced by the Ataturk Forest Farm and Zoo in the Gazi district, and by other facilities in the Elmadag, Kubak and Bipazari districts. Ankara is the center of the state-owned and private Turkish defense and aerospace companies, where the industrial plants and headquarters of the Turkish aerospace industries, MKEASELSAN, Havelsan, Roketsan, FNSS, Neural Makina, and numerous other firms are located. Exports to foreign countries from these defense and aerospace firms have steadily increased in the past decades. The IDEF in Ankara is one of the largest international expositions of the global arms industry. A number of the global automotive companies also have production facilities in Ankara, such as the German bus and truck manufacturer Manşe. Ankara hosts the OSDIM Industrial Zone, Turkey's largest industrial park. A large percentage of the complicated employment in Ankara is provided by the state institutions, such as the ministries, under-secretariats, and other administrative bodies of the Turkish government. There are also many foreign citizens working as diplomats or clerks in the embassies of the respective countries. Politics. Ankara is politically a triple battleground between the ruling Conservative Justice and Development Party, the opposition Kemalist center-left Republican People's Party, and the nationalist far-right Nationalist Movement Party. The province of Ankara is divided into 25 districts. The CHP's key and almost only political stronghold in Ankara lies within the central area of Kankaya, which is the city's most populous district. While the CHP has always gained between 60 and 70% of the vote in Kankaya since 2002, political support elsewhere throughout Ankara is minimal. The high population within Kankaya, as well as Yeni Mahal to an extent, has allowed the CHP to take overall second place behind the AKP in both local and general elections, with the MHP a close third. Despite the fact fact that the MHP is politically stronger than the CHP in almost every other district. Overall, the AKP enjoys the most support throughout the city. The electorate of Ankara thus tend to vote in favor of the political right, far more so than the other main cities of Istanbul and Izmir. In retrospect, the 2013-14 protests against the AKP government were particularly strong in Ankara, proving to be fatal on multiple occasions. Melik Gökçek has been the Metropolitan Mayor of Ankara since 1994 as a politician from the Welfare Party. He later joined the Virtue Party and then the AKP. Initially elected in the 1994 local elections, he was re-elected in 1999, 2004 and 2009. In the 2014 local election, Gökçek stood for a fifth term. The MHP Metropolitan mayoral candidate for the 2009 local elections, conservative politician Mansur Yilmaz, stood as the CHP candidate against Gökçek. In a heavily controversial election, Gökçek was declared the winner by just 1% ahead of Yilmaz amid allegations of systematic electoral fraud, with the Supreme Electoral Council and courts rejecting Yilmaz's appeals. He has declared intention to take the irregularities to the European Court of Human Rights. Although Gökçek was inaugurated for a fifth term, most election observers believe that Yilmaz was the winner of the election.